The church never told you this secret, and now you will understand why. For centuries, religious institutions built their power on a single lie, that you are separate from God, that you need intermediaries, that your salvation depends on external approval. Joel Goldsmith discovered what they desperately tried to hide from you. What if I told you that the greatest spiritual truth ever concealed is not about God being distant, but about God being your very consciousness? This is not heresy. This is the mystical Christianity that Jesus actually taught before institutions rewrote his message to control masses and maintain their hierarchical power structures. The moment you recognize your true spiritual identity, you no longer need priests, rituals, or religious approval to access divine power. You become dangerous to systems built entirely on your spiritual dependency. This is why they fear your awakening. This is why Joel's teachings were marginalized. This is the secret that transforms everything you believe. Churches thrive on your belief that you are a sinner needing salvation, a beggar needing divine favor, a lost soul requiring institutional guidance for redemption. Their entire power structure collapses the moment you discover that divine consciousness is not something distant you must seek, but the very essence of what you already are right now. Traditional religion taught you to petition God for help, to beg for healing, to plead for abundance like a desperate child. This approach assumes complete separation between you and divine power. Joel Goldsmith revealed the revolutionary truth that changes everything. You do not ask God to change circumstances. You recognize that God consciousness is already present, already whole. When Amanda from Ohio first heard this teaching, she felt genuinely terrified. Everything her church taught directly contradicted this truth. But over 3 months of practicing recognition instead of petition, her chronic anxiety completely dissolved. Not because God finally answered her desperate prayers, but because she recognized anxiety had absolutely no power in spiritual consciousness. Your consciousness is not receiving God's presence from somewhere distant. Your consciousness is divine presence expressing itself as your awareness right now. This single distinction shatters every religious teaching about unworthiness, original sin, and spiritual separation. Joel Goldsmith spent decades helping people understand this mystical truth that Jesus taught, but churches buried. Think carefully about what this means for your daily life. When you face illness, you are not begging God for healing from above. You are recognizing that in divine consciousness, disease has no reality or power. When you face financial lack, you are not petitioning for abundance. You recognize consciousness itself as infinite supply already present. This is not positive thinking or hopeful affirmation techniques. This is recognition of spiritual truth that existed before any problem appeared in your experience. Kevin, a construction worker from Texas, applied this to his failing business. Instead of praying desperately for more clients, he spent 2 months recognizing consciousness cannot experience lack. His business transformed completely through this shift. The power the church fears is your ability to access divine consciousness directly without their permission, without their rituals, without their control over your spiritual life. Joel Goldsmith called this impersonalization. You learn to see through the illusion of material conditions and recognize the spiritual reality behind all appearances of limitation. When you practice recognition prayer, something radical happens. You stop treating God as a cosmic vending machine that dispenses blessings when you insert enough prayers and good behavior. Instead, you realize that divine consciousness is already operating as your true identity. The shift from asking to recognizing changes absolutely everything about your spiritual experience. This is why religious institutions marginalize Joel's teachings despite their profound effectiveness. A congregation that discovers its inherent divine nature no longer needs weekly sermons about unworthiness. A believer who accesses spiritual consciousness directly no longer depends on intermediaries for divine connection. Your spiritual independence threatens their entire organizational foundation. Let me share what happened when Brian from California discovered this truth after 40 years of traditional church attendance. He spent decades praying for his son's addiction recovery, begging God to intervene, attending prayer meetings weekly. Nothing changed. His son's condition worsened. despite constant petitionary prayer. Then, Brian learned Joel Goldsmith's recognition approach. Instead of asking God to heal his son, he began recognizing that in spiritual consciousness, addiction has no power or reality. He stopped seeing his son as a broken person needing divine repair. He recognized his son's true identity as spiritual consciousness, already whole and complete. Over 6 months, this shift in Brian's consciousness created an unexpected transformation. His son, without knowing about Brian's new practice, suddenly decided to enter rehabilitation. Today, 18 months later, his son maintained sobriety. Brian understands this was not God finally answering old prayers. It was consciousness recognizing its own spiritual wholeness. Jessica from Florida spent 15 years in evangelical churches being told her depression was spiritual warfare, that demons attacked her mind, that she needed deliverance ministry and constant prayer covering. She underwent countless sessions with spiritual counselors. Her depression persisted, sometimes worsening under the weight of spiritual guilt. When Jessica discovered Joel Goldsmith's teachings, everything shifted. She learned that depression was not demonic attack requiring spiritual battle. It was simply the absence of recognition of her true spiritual nature. She began practicing recognition. In divine consciousness, there is no darkness, no depression, no mental illness. This was not denial of her experience. This was recognition of spiritual truth beyond material appearance. Over 4 months of consistent practice, Jessica's depression gradually lifted. Not through deliverance ministry, not through more intense prayer, but through recognizing the consciousness that existed before depression appeared. Her church called this dangerous teaching. Jessica called it liberation. The technique Joel Goldsmith taught is elegantly simple yet profoundly powerful. When facing any challenge, you pause and recognize this truth. Divine consciousness is the only power operating. Whatever appears as problem has no power, no reality, no presence in spiritual truth. You do not fight the problem. You recognize its powerlessness. This sounds abstract until you practice it consistently. Daniel from Michigan applied this to his chronic back pain that lasted 7 years. Doctors found no physical cause. Physical therapy provided temporary relief only. Traditional prayers for healing produced no lasting change. He remained trapped in constant discomfort. Daniel learned to practice recognition whenever pain appeared. He would pause and silently acknowledge. In divine consciousness, there is no pain, no physical limitation, no material condition. He practiced this dozens of times daily for 3 months. Gradually, the pain diminished. After 5 months, it disappeared completely. His healing came through consciousness recognition, not medical intervention or traditional prayer. Here is what churches desperately want to hide from you. When you discover your true spiritual power, through recognition practice, you become spiritually independent. You no longer need their authority to access divine presence. You no longer depend on their rituals for spiritual connection. You become the direct expression of divine consciousness. Joel Goldsmith revealed, this is not rebellion against religion. This is awakening to the mystical Christianity that Jesus actually taught before institutions corrupted his message. You are not separate from God, waiting for connection. You are divine, consciousness experiencing itself as individual awareness. This recognition transforms everything: health, relationships, finances, purpose, peace. The transformation happens gradually over weeks and months as you consistently practice recognition instead of petition. Some days you will feel profound peace. Other days you will doubt everything. This is normal spiritual development. Continue practicing recognition. Continue seeing through material appearances to spiritual reality. Your consciousness will shift, and your experience will follow. If this revelation of your true spiritual power resonates with your soul, like this video to help others discover Joel Goldsmith's hidden teachings. Subscribe for more Stickle Christianity, wisdom, and comment. Which religious lie are you ready to see through today? Beyond basic recognition, Joel Goldsmith taught a complementary practice called impersonalization. This means you learn to see through personal sense of both good and evil. When someone treats you badly, you do not personalize it. You recognize they are operating from limited human consciousness, not from their true spiritual identity. When Michelle from Arizona practiced this with her difficult mother-in-law, everything changed. For 12 years, every family gathering ended in conflict. Michelle tried forgiveness techniques, boundary setting, and avoiding contact. Nothing worked. The tension remained. The relationship deteriorated further despite traditional Christian approaches to reconciliation. Then Michelle learned impersonalization from Joel's teachings. She began recognizing her mother-in-law's critical behavior was not personal attack, but limited consciousness operating. She stopped defending herself, stopped taking offense, stopped seeing her mother-in-law as enemy. She practiced recognizing the spiritual identity beneath the human behavior. Over 8 months, their relationship transformed completely, not because her mother-in-law changed behavior, but because Michelle changed consciousness. The criticism continued initially, but Michelle no longer experienced it as attack. Eventually, as Michelle's consciousness shifted, her mother-in-law's behavior actually softened. Consciousness transformation creates relationship healing. Another powerful technique Joel taught is the practice of conscious contact with spiritual reality. Throughout your day, you do not wait for problems to practice recognition. You develop constant awareness of divine consciousness operating as your life. This builds spiritual consciousness muscle that responds automatically when challenges appear. Ryan from Washington began practicing this technique every morning for 20 minutes. He would sit quietly and recognize divine consciousness is operating right now. Infinite intelligence guides my day. Spiritual wholeness is my true nature. He did this consistently for 3 months before seeing results. Then unexpected challenges hit. His company announced layoffs. His department faced elimination. Traditional prayer would involve begging God to save his job, creating anxiety about outcomes. Instead, Ryan practiced recognition. In consciousness, there is no lack, no unemployment, no financial insecurity. He maintained this awareness daily. Within 6 weeks, a competitor company recruited Ryan for a position with higher pay and better conditions. This was not magic. This was consciousness recognizing its own infinite supply and attracting corresponding experience. Joel Goldsmith taught that consciousness always externalizes its recognition. Ryan's practice created his transformation. Joel Goldsmith also taught meditation as gateway to consciousness transformation, not traditional meditation seeking mental silence, but meditation as listening to divine consciousness. You sit quietly, release all thoughts about problems, and simply rest in awareness of spiritual presence already operating. Stephanie from Georgia struggled with this initially. Her mind raced constantly. Every meditation session felt like failure. She wanted instant peace like other practitioners. Described. After 2 weeks, she nearly quit the practice entirely. This is where most people abandon consciousness work. But Stephanie persisted. She meditated 15 minutes daily despite mental noise, despite feeling nothing spiritual, despite doubting everything. After 6 weeks, something shifted. One morning she experienced profound peace that lasted hours. This was not her achievement. This was consciousness revealing itself when her mental resistance finally weakened. Now, 9 months later, Stephanie accesses this peace regularly. Her anxiety disorder that plagued her for 15 years no longer controls her life. She still has challenging moments, but she knows how to return to consciousness recognition. This gradual development is realistic spiritual progress, not instant miraculous transformation. The final complementary technique Joel taught is practicing non-reaction to appearances. When disease appears, you do not react with fear. When lack appears, you do not react with anxiety. When conflict appears, you do not react with anger. You pause, recognize spiritual truth, and let consciousness reveal its solution. Charles from Illinois applied this when his doctor diagnosed him with serious heart condition requiring immediate surgery. Traditional response would involve panic, desperate prayer, and complete focus on medical problem. Charles chose different response based on Joel's teaching. He acknowledged medical facts without giving them spiritual power. He consulted doctors while practicing recognition. In divine consciousness there is no diseased heart, no physical limitation, no material condition controlling my life. He prepared for surgery while maintaining consciousness of spiritual wholeness. The surgery went unexpectedly well. Recovery happened faster than doctors predicted. Follow-up tests showed better results than anticipated. Charles understands this was not miraculous intervention. This was consciousness maintaining recognition of spiritual truth even while addressing human experience practically. Joel taught integration of spiritual consciousness with practical wisdom, not denial of human existence. Now let me address the realistic challenges you will face when practicing Joel Goldsmith's consciousness teachings. The first major obstacle is doubt. After days or weeks of recognition practice with no visible change, you will question everything. Your mind will insist this is foolish, that traditional prayer is safer, that you need something more tangible. Nicole from Pennsylvania faced this exact challenge. She practiced recognition for 5 weeks with her chronic migraines. Nothing changed. The migraines continued with same intensity and frequency. Her church friends told her to return to traditional prayer. Her family thought she joined a cult. The pressure to abandon this practice became intense. Nicole continued, despite doubt. She recognized that consciousness transformation does not follow human timelines or expectations. She practiced recognition even when migraines appeared, even when doubt screamed loudly, even when nothing seemed to work. This is the critical point where spiritual consciousness either deepens or collapses. After 3 months total, Nicole's migraines decreased in frequency. After 6 months, they diminished in intensity. After 9 months, they became rare occurrences easily managed. Her persistence through doubt created the consciousness shift necessary for healing. Most people quit before breakthrough happens. This is why churches maintain control through doubt and fear. The second challenge is social pressure from religious communities that view Joel's teachings as heretical or dangerous. When you stop attending prayer meetings begging God for help, when you stop participating in deliverance ministry, when you speak about consciousness instead of faith, you face criticism and sometimes ostracism. Andrew from Tennessee lost his small group Bible study community when he shared Joel Goldsmith's recognition practice. They accused him of New Age infiltration, of abandoning biblical Christianity, of following false teaching. Church leaders warned him about spiritual deception. His friends stopped inviting him to GAT. Herrings. This social cost is real and painful. Andrew spent 3 months questioning whether consciousness recognition was worth losing his community. He felt isolated, lonely, and uncertain. But he also noticed something profound. His practice of recognition brought more peace than years of traditional religious activity ever produced. Today, 2 years later, Andrew found new community with people practicing mystical Christianity. He maintains love for his former church while recognizing they operate from limited understanding. He learned that spiritual growth sometimes requires leaving familiar religious comfort. Joel Goldsmith himself faced this same rejection from traditional religious institutions throughout his teaching career. The third challenge is handling setbacks when problems return after initial improvement. You practice recognition for weeks, see positive changes, then the old condition reappears. Your mind interprets this as failure, as proof that consciousness recognition does not work reliably. Melissa from Colorado experienced this with her financial struggles. She practiced recognition of consciousness as infinite supply for 2 months. Unexpected money arrived through various sources. She felt encouraged and increased her practice. Then her car needed expensive repairs. Medical bills arrived, and financial pressure returned worse than before. Traditional response would be thinking consciousness recognition failed, returning to desperate, petitionary prayer, giving up on Joel's teachings entirely. Melissa learned the truth. Setbacks are consciousness testing your recognition depth. When appearance worsens, your practice must deepen, not weaken. She continued recognizing spiritual truth despite worsening appearances. She maintained awareness that consciousness is supply regardless of temporary conditions. Over the following 4 months, her finances stabilized. Eli's then improved beyond previous levels. The setback was not failure, but opportunity for consciousness to establish deeper recognition. Joel taught that spiritual development is not linear but progressive through challenges. The fourth challenge is maintaining recognition practice during intense emotional crisis. When grief strikes, When betrayal wounds, when loss devastates, conscious recognition feels impossible. Your human experience demands attention. Spiritual practice seems disconnected from real pain and suffering. William from Virginia faced this when his wife unexpectedly asked for divorce after 23 years of marriage. The emotional devastation was complete. He could barely function daily, much less practice consciousness recognition. Traditional religious friends told him to pray for reconciliation, to fast for breakthrough, to believe for miracle. William tried Joel's approach instead. He did not deny his pain or pretend everything was fine. He acknowledged human grief while practicing recognition. In divine consciousness, there is no broken relationship, no permanent loss, no destroyed future. He sat in pain while recognizing spiritual wholeness existed beneath emotional turmoil. This was not instant healing. For 6 months, William struggled daily, but gradually his consciousness shifted. He found peace not dependent on reconciliation. He discovered identity beyond marital status. His healing came through recognition, not through marriage restoration. Joel taught that spiritual consciousness transforms you, not necessarily your circumstances. If these realistic challenges and solutions speak truth to your spiritual journey, like this video to support consciousness teaching, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith practices, and comment which obstacle are you ready to transform through recognition today. Now let us explore advanced integration of consciousness recognition in your daily work life. Joel Goldsmith taught that spiritual consciousness is not separate Sunday practice, but continuous awareness transforming every activity. Your workplace becomes consciousness laboratory, where you practice recognition during meetings, conflicts, challenges, and decisions. Nathan from Oregon worked in highly competitive sales environment where colleagues backstabbed each other constantly for commissions. Traditional Christian approach would involve praying for protection, setting boundaries, and enduring toxic culture while waiting for better job. Nathan chose consciousness integration instead. He began practicing impersonalization with competitive colleagues. When they undermined him, he recognized they operated from limited consciousness, not evil intent. When stress appeared, he recognized consciousness experiencing temporary appearance, not permanent condition. When pressure mounted, he recognized spiritual peace already present beneath surface anxiety. Over 1 year of consistent practice, Nathan's entire work experience transformed. He maintained highest sales without competitive manipulation. Colleagues who previously attacked him began seeking his advice. Management promoted him to leadership position. His consciousness shift created corresponding external transformation without changing jobs or confronting toxic behaviors directly. Advanced practice also means recognizing consciousness in relationship conflicts without avoiding necessary conversations or boundaries. Joel taught that spiritual recognition does not mean accepting abuse or manipulation. It means seeing through personal sense to spiritual truth while taking appropriate human action when needed. Samantha from Georgia struggled with her teenage daughter's rebellion and destructive behavior. Traditional religious counsel told her to pray harder, set ICTA rules, and demonstrate tougher love. These approaches increased conflict and deepened their disconnection. Her daughter became more rebellious and withdrawn. Samantha applied Joel's consciousness recognition differently. She practiced seeing her daughter's spiritual identity beneath rebellious behavior. She stopped reacting from fear and anger. She maintained boundaries while releasing judgment. She recognized that her daughter's true nature was divine consciousness, not troubled teenager. This was not permissive parenting or passive acceptance. Samantha still enforced consequences and maintained structure, but her consciousness shifted from fear-based control to recognition-based love. Over 18 months, their relationship gradually healed. Her daughter's behavior improved not from stricter discipline, but from consciousness transformation in their relationship. Dynamic. Another advanced application is using consciousness recognition for creative and professional breakthrough. Traditional prayer asks God to bless your project or grant success. Joel's approach recognizes that infinite intelligence already operates as your consciousness, providing creative solutions and professional guidance. Naturally, Benjamin from Colorado struggled with his small business innovation. He needed creative solution to compete with larger companies, but felt blocked despite traditional prayers for wisdom and breakthrough. He spent months stuck in same patterns, producing same limited results, facing eventual business failure. He began practicing recognition. Infinite intelligence is operating as my consciousness right now. Creative solutions already exist in spiritual consciousness. Divine wisdom guides my decisions naturally. He practiced this 20 minutes daily for 6 weeks without forcing solutions or analyzing problems obsessively. Then creative ideas began flowing naturally. Solu. Chions appeared during meditation, while driving during conversations. Within 4 months, he implemented innovations that transformed his business competitiveness. This was not God finally answering prayer. This was consciousness recognizing its own infinite intelligence and allowing it to express naturally through his awareness and action. The most advanced integration Joel taught is maintaining consciousness recognition during success and abundance, not just during crisis and lack. When life flows easily, when health is good, when finances are stable, you must recognize consciousness operating, not credit yourself or circumstances for temporary good fortune. Emily from Massachusetts experienced rapid career advancement, unexpected financial increase, and improved relationships simultaneously. Traditional religious response would involve thanking God for blessings while secretly fearing they might disappear. Emily practiced different consciousness approach based on Joel's teaching. She recognized these expressions as consciousness externalizing its nature, not temporary good luck requiring protection. She maintained awareness that consciousness itself is infinite supply, perfect health, and harmonious relationship. She did not cling to manifestations, but rested in consciousness recognition that creates all experience. 2 years later, she maintains these conditions not through anxious protection, but through consistent consciousness recognition. When challenges appear, she applies same recognition. When abundance flows, she applies same recognition. Her stability comes from consciousness, not from favorable circumstances. This is advanced spiritual maturity. Joel Goldsmith taught throughout his ministry years. Now we approach the ultimate transformation. And Joel Goldsmith's teachings offer complete shift from human sense of life to consciousness living. This is not overnight conversion, but gradual awakening over months and years. You increasingly see through material appearances to spiritual reality. You increasingly operate from consciousness recognition rather than circumstantial reaction. Robert from Arizona describes his transformation after 2 years of consistent practice. He no longer experiences life as human person, struggling with problems and seeking solutions. He increasingly experiences life as consciousness, recognizing itself, with challenges appearing as opportunities for deeper recognition rather than threats to overcome. This does not mean he never faces difficulties or experiences human emotions. It means his identity shifted from material person to spiritual consciousness. When problems appear, his first response is recognition rather than reaction. When emotions arise, he acknowledges them while maintaining consciousness awareness beneath them. His relationships improved not because people changed, but because his consciousness changed. His health stabilized not because body improved, but because he recognized consciousness as true identity. His finances increased not because circumstances favored him, but because consciousness recognized its own infinite supply. This is the total transformation Joel Goldsmith pointed toward consistently. This transformation reveals why churches fear Joel's teachings so intensely. When you awaken to consciousness as your identity, you no longer need religious institutions to mediate divine presence. You no longer depend on clergy to interpret spiritual truth. You no longer require rituals to access divine power. You become spiritually free and independent. Catherine from Illinois left her church after discovering Joel Goldsmith's consciousness teachings, not from anger or rebellion, but from recognition that traditional religion no longer served her spiritual development. Her church labeled this as backsliding and spiritual deception. Her family worried about her salvation and eternal destiny. But Catherine experienced more spiritual growth in 6 months of consciousness practice than in 20 years of traditional church attendance. She found deeper connection with divine presence, more practical transformation in daily challenges, and greater peace than religious activity ever provided. Her departure was not spiritual decline, but consciousness awakening. Today, 3 years later, she maintains respect for religious traditions while recognizing their limitations. She understands churches serve important community functions for people at certain spiritual development stages. But she also knows that mystical Christianity, Jesus taught, transcends institutional religion. Joel Goldsmith helped her discover this truth that transforms everything about spiritual life. The final transformation is discovering that consciousness recognition becomes your natural state rather than practice technique. Joel taught that initially you practice recognition deliberately and consciously, but over time, consciousness awareness becomes your default perspective. You spontaneously see through appearances to spiritual truth without forcing practice. Matthew from Florida describes reaching this state after 3 years of daily consciousness practice. He no longer sets aside specific meditation times, though he still values quiet reflection. He no longer consciously practices recognition during challenges, though he remains aware of consciousness operating. The practice became his natural way of perceiving and experiencing life. This does not mean he reached perfection or never experiences human struggles. It means consciousness recognition became integrated into his identity rather than remaining external technique he applies. When problems appear, recognition happens nature. When decisions arise, consciousness guidance flows naturally. When relationships challenge him, impersonalization occurs naturally. This is spiritual maturity. Joel Goldsmith pointed toward living as consciousness rather than living as person trying to practice consciousness. The transformation is subtle, gradual, and profound. It cannot be rushed or forced. It develops naturally through consistent practice over months and years of patient, persistent consciousness recognition. You now understand why the Church fears your discovery of consciousness as your true identity. Their power depends on your spiritual dependency. Their authority relies on your belief in separation from God. Their control requires your ignorance of the mystical truth Jesus actually taught before institutions corrupted his message for organizational purposes. Joel Goldsmith dedicated his life to revealing this hidden truth. You are not separate from divine presence waiting for connection. You are divine consciousness expressing itself as individual awareness. Recognition of this truth transforms everything: health, relationships, finances, purpose, peace, and your entire experience of life itself. The transformation happens gradually through consistent practice. Some weeks bring breakthrough. Some weeks bring doubt. Continue practicing recognition anyway. Continue seeing through material appearances to spiritual reality. Continue acknowledging consciousness as your true identity. Your experience will shift correspondingly over time. You are spiritually free, divinely empowered, and eternally connected to infinite intelligence operating as your consciousness right now. This is not religious belief requiring faith. This is spiritual truth requiring recognition. Joel Goldsmith gave you the key. Now you must use it consistently and patiently. Your consciousness awakening begins today. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets revealing your true divine power, like this video, to help others discover mystical Christianity. Subscribe for more transformative consciousness teachings and comment "I am consciousness" to confirm your awakening to spiritual truth.